welcome back to Innovation Nation. I'm so excited. We're going to be here today to discuss the third part of the mini series we're doing here for the artificial possibility with Jon Harris. And today we'll be discussing the why. Jon, if you can please say hi and introduce yourself again for the group.
Yeah, Jon Harris, Director of Enterprise Solutions with Guidepost Solutions. I won't go too deep into the background. So hopefully if you're joining us now, you've attended a couple of our conversations. So, but high level, I've been in the industry for coming up on 15 years, majority of that spent in the end user role with the aerospace and defense company, but also worked in technology manufacturing and been in consulting for the last 2 years. If you want to know more, go check out the brand new Guidepost website. Shameless plug, we just rebranded, and guidepostsolutions.com. You can see my bio there, and also a did you know about me that I'm not going to tell you now. You have to go to the website to find it out.
I didn't know you guys rebranded, so I'm gonna have to go look at that after too.
Yeah, just splashed a few other cool colors, and the website's a lot easier to search. It's really cool. A lot more, again, totally shameless plug for me, selfishly. The Enterprise Solutions area has been added and expanded, and you can learn a lot more about the areas that my team brings to the table, which it goes without saying are completely awesome. So go check it out.
Of course, absolutely. And I'm excited because we're going to get to dive into the third part of our series where we're going to talk about the why behind artificial intelligence. We've talked already a lot about the different technology out there, the how, the what, what is AI, for the listeners who haven't tuned into the first 2 episodes, really quickly on the what behind AI. Artificial intelligence, as we all know, or if you don't know already, is, a bunch of algorithms where we're feeding it to computers. The computers are then making, more complex decisions for the humans. And we are able to give time back, to the human operator to do more and think less. And today we want to talk more around the why. Like if you're a customer and you're having to make a decision on a solution, or if this might be the right fit for you, how would artificial intelligence play into that? And when do we decide we want to use it? So I'm going to let Jon now take the topic and start us off, and then we'll get into it.
Thanks. And if you hear some vibration in the background, they're doing construction work on the building that I'm in. So we'll work through that. So the why, I mean, it's our last topic of the 3-part series, but it's probably the most important because this is where you need to start, right? So you have to have a reason to use AI. And we've touched on this in our other series sessions, but you need a problem to solve. And so what I think often happens and why folks both become reluctant to adopt new technology or pissed about it when they do and it doesn't work just the way they want it. And this isn't necessarily just security industry. This is my experience spending 10 years in the corporate world where we adopted different technologies for all types of different reasons, whether it was an ERP system or a data management system or what have you. If you didn't have a compelling problem statement and business need, then it's just not going to work. And so, what Sarah and I are going to unpack today is what are some of those whys? What are some of the reasons why I would want to use AI in security? And earlier in our discussions, I think this was, we had picked at a couple of reasons why even it would be beneficial for a manufacturer to be using AI, it'd be beneficial for an integrator to be using it. But for the purpose of this discussion, we're really going to focus on that end user space and dive into where those whys would be, and even tackle some of the technology pieces of it as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Jon. It's a really good overview. And I think it's a good point now where we can start with a why. We'll talk through use cases. So I think given your background, Jon, being an end user, I would like to prompt you here. If you were to think over the years when you were sitting in the end user seat, now sitting where you are today, working with many different end users, is there a why that comes up often? Or is there something you see in the industry that we've been doing traditionally a certain way where you're now seeing AI supplement? And I'd love to kind of unpack an example directly coming from you, whether it was one that you had yourself from being an end user or working with the end users you work with today?
Absolutely. So I think where AI automation is most mature is in video. And so that's often the easiest place to connect your head to, because computer visual analytics are, I think, the most well understood, and because you can see it, right? So it's very easy to watch a VMS running and say, look, we're capturing how many people are walking in the door, and we're aggregating that data and providing you a dashboard that tells you X. Or when you're searching through your video history, we can pull out all the people with red shirts, and do that pretty simply. So those are like the really easy, not easy to do, but I think easy to talk about, because they're visual and they're common to us. They're well known. When I was the first thing that I was trying to look at, what for me was actually insider threat identification, and trying to aggregate behavioral activities of individuals across their everywhere they will say digitally and physically touched an organization. So I worked for a government contractor. We had classified programs, and we had I won't bore you with the details, but a laborious compliance requirement that the US government put upon us to make sure we were properly protecting government technology and government classified information, right? It was a great honor to serve in a position where we were able to do that, and so we took it very seriously. What we wanted to do, because of all that, is, it was hugely manual to figure all the things that the government wanted us to do out, and then routinely look at them and check them. So we looked for automation. So my attempt was to say, all right, I want to create an access control profile about everyone in my access control database. When do they come? When do they go? What access do they have? And then create a variation outside of that, meaning 10% outside of this window is fine. So if I usually come at 6 and I leave at 4, if I come in a few days at, a little bit early or leave a little bit late, no worries. I'm kind of building that threshold and identity between us. And then also, how much information am I downloading? What websites am I going to? Now people look at this and they go, whoa, big brother. But if you're doing this on a company dime, on company assets with company information, IP, and government technology owned information, that's the cost of entry. So this is just how we protect things in that sector of the marketplace. We did the same thing on your digital identity. Where are you going? What are you doing? How much data are you downloading? So if all of a sudden you downloaded, gigabytes of information, and you printed them, and your access control says that you were in at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, we have the trigger points to proactively identify that something outside of the norm has happened, right? So imagine doing that manually. Okay, imagine doing all that manually, and then I will pause and let you speak.
I want to ask you 2 things there, because it's interesting, because I like that we're starting with video analytics, because I also feel like it's a good one to use it's almost a good example in the sense where, like, video analytics came about, but why?
Yeah.
Right? Like, we've had video analytics around for a long time. We call it computer vision. You tell the software, like, we have algorithms that we're writing and helping the software understand what it needs to look for from the human mind, right? Because we can sit there, to what you're saying, and manually look over the feed. And if we're going to use the red shirt example, we're going to have it look for red shirts, right? It's like we're telling this software to do something for us, right? And what's interesting is that you're talking about how the fee of entry, or like the way to get in, quote unquote, to be a part of that entity for the government environment, right? Where there's this protected information, you as the operator get to decide, like, what we consider norm and what we consider out of norm. But we still, as the human, get to say, this is our current process today. This is what we're having to do manually. This is what we're typically looking for. What we like to look for and know is what's considered good or bad, right? And then that helps us identify maybe inappropriate behavior or peculiar behaviors. And we've trained our teams to manually go look for that. And it's a good example because in your use case, Jon, as that customer, as the end user, it makes sense for you to have a computer help you do that and use AI because now your team can go do more, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And it's important to think about because when we first heard about video analytics, I'm sure, you know, it's like, yeah, it's really cool. You can look for red shirts, but why? Like, what's the point, right?
Yeah. Well, and I'm having active conversations with clients today about that very topic, and I have this incident seared in my mind from about 7 years ago when we had I have two of them. One of them is a parking lot incident where a car was stolen, and the other one was an incident where we something happened inside the factory was an incident that caused damage to property, which then caused things to malfunction. We had video coverage on both of them. In both instances, it took security officers poring over video because there's multiple camera coverages we had to take into consideration. There were PTZs on auto tour, which are the bane of my existence because when they look away, that's when the stuff happens. So if you're installing those today, PSA, stop it. They're not worth it. Please stop. Call me and I can do an assessment and we can fix that. So those were happening, right? So over a weekend, 24 hours a day, 72 or 3 days, you're going 72 straight hours. I have security officers around the clock in my SOC poring over video. And with both cases, inconclusively, could not find anything that determined that helped us in any sort of way. So, and when I talk to existing end users, they all nod and go, yes, right? So the value cost of that, meaning how much does it cost you for that officer or a number of officers to sit at the desk and pour over that information and not get anything out of it, and also not be able to do anything else. So while doing that, how much is that worth? And then put in the proactive component of it, that you could, in essence, say that between this time and this time, if any of these things happen, I want a notification, right? So now you can use it reactively to, in a snap of a finger, search through video for certain factors. Right. And also you can do, if then notification proactively while things are happening. And so right there, you look at, and then it's do you really then need a security officer sitting in front of a video wall, right? There's a great research that was done. It was done in the UK. It was like in the mid 2000s, but I still think it holds true. And if I could find the reference, we could put it in the show notes. It was a GSOC video optimism, or security GSOC officer performance study. And a lot of the content that we throw around the security industry about how many cameras you can watch and how long you should sit down and officer fatigue, it was grounded in this study. But it shows you can only look at 2, maybe 3 video feeds at once effectively. And all you can look for is changes in the video, meaning something's there, now it's not. Or something's not there, then it appears, right? So it's very, very rudimentary. And your effectiveness in looking at the video is very limited, meaning your periods of time before getting fatigued. Think about how tired we all are sitting in front of our computers all day under current circumstances, right? So 10x that if you're a security operator sitting there staring at screens while you're answering a phone, while you're looking at access control, while you're looking at building management systems, and you're expected to be effective.
So, Jon, I need to kind of interject here because you I think you just helped me with an aha moment in a sense, which is why I love the conversations that we have, and I love the format of them, because we can go on and on and on, right? And it's like, these are things that are happening every day. And you bring up officer fatigue. And if I was to try to generalize, if I was to put a term to the why, I actually feel like your concept of officer fatigue is the why in every aspect, whether it's integrator fatigue, admin fatigue, officer fatigue.
Yeah, it's human. It's security professional fatigue.
It's security
and you could,
fatigue. And
you could,
designer and consultant and everyone.
Well, and you could say that's the why for AI globally. It's human performance fatigue.
Yeah.
It's exactly. I spend too much time doing, and you know, you and I talked about this a couple episodes ago around, you know, why I've let AI take control of my calendar and my inbox a bit, because I don't have time, or if I do, I can't perform higher value tasks. I actually had a client of mine reach out to me and say, you know, what's this Cortana thing? Like, because it captured an email from me that was asking them to do something. So he thought it was like from me. And I was like, no, this is just Microsoft trying to be helpful. And he's like, I don't want their help. So he's like, nope. But he's a senior level executive that has other folks that help him manage that. And so, you know, so it's not just about the security operator, it's about the anyone operator.
Yes.
And, you know, just like having certain components set up in Salesforce. So when you put in a lead or an opportunity or, you know, a project, that certain things happen without you having to take steps, because that 15 to 20 extra minutes that you would have to invest in each one of those opportunities, now that compiles into hours and years over the period of your work life, that you can novel thought, not work. You take time off, you can, you know, rest, or you can work on other higher value tasks. And so, yeah, I think you nailed it. I mean, that's the golden why. That's the golden why, right?
That is the why. Well, it's interesting too, because you know, we started with the video idea, and I think it's a good starting point to the conversation. I think it's already obvious too, like this why that we're recording today, we're going to have to follow up with our part B to the why, because there's a lot of aspects in our industry that we're going to want to dive into. But I think video is the good starting point, because it's been around for a while. Like video analytics, computer vision has been around. There was obviously an important why to someone back when they created it. Maybe it was easy to do. Who knows where, I mean, it would be actually quite interesting to understand that inception point of it. But I think we're at a point in the industry though, John, where it's 2020. People either have too much time on their hands or don't have enough things to do with the time they have on their, like, you know what I'm saying? Like it's either like you're working too much or you don't have enough work to do, but you're being forced to like do more with what we have, right? Because we have very little in our days today during 2020. And I think it's interesting because I've seen so many things pop up now. Maybe it's because I'm paying attention more to what's out there, because I have that more time to do that. I'm not as busy every day going out, going with customers. But what I'm trying to get at is that this year seems like it's been a very pivotal point for our industry. And I've noticed a lot of other quote unquote fatigue points of the industry that are finally coming out, that are finally being highlighted, that are finally being noticed. And I'm seeing a lot of AI be the quote answer to that. But why? Is it what we need? And is it being done right? And I would like to kind of maybe transition, if you're okay with it, John, into the world of access control. Because access control as a whole has been the way it is for a very long time.
Right.
Video has evolved. We have created computer vision. We do all these cool things. We can find the red shirts and the blue hats. We can do all that. We've been able to do it since inception. And it was a great idea when it came about. LPR is another example that stems off of the video, right? Access control though. COVID-19 happens. No one wants to touch anything. No one is in their buildings anymore. A lot of customers are realizing, oh my God, I can't even get into my site necessarily to administer like I was constantly doing before. All the admin tasks are changing and how we do it. And now I'm seeing AI come about quicker than I've ever seen before.
Right. And you know, access control is an interesting space to look at, because what differentiates it from video is it's less visible. So, and it's taken for granted, because you have access control everywhere in your life, meaning you have, anytime you're going from one space to another, there's some level of access control. The door in the mall that you open to walk in is access control, because if it wasn't, they wouldn't have a door there, right? Just because it's not locked when you're going there, but it locks at some point. When at 9 p.m. when that mall closes, it locks. Same thing at Target, same thing at the grocery store, same thing at your house, same thing in your corporate office. So the big question, it's not as easy to conceptualize the value of AI in access control when you're looking at, so you have to find the right problem to solve. So the problem isn't the opening of the door necessarily, because you can tweak that by reader range and technology type. So, but it's maybe when the door is going to open, how it's going to be open, who's going to be able to open it. And the fact that you can do all those things without significant, you know, technology uplift or price differentiation than what you're doing today. So for example, the way the traditional access control industry has lived is to say, our hardware is better, our software is better, rip out everything you have, put this in place, breathe for 10 years, and we'll play the game all over again. So now, and there's competing companies right now who are trying to fight this battle in the open market. You know, startup technology companies that are saying, hey, you can just put us on to your existing technology and we give you all this flexibility. And then legacy companies saying they're like, you know, they're leeches, right? They're just, you know, without us, they don't exist, and you're breaking our technology by putting them on it, right? And so it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and how the end user responds. But, you know, unless the traditional access control companies embrace AI and the de-emphasization of the hardware and the upstream components, the controller and the servers, then, you know, this battle, like it's gonna be a zero-sum game. Like if they can't embrace it, then they may not make it long-term, right? I mean, that's just my like projection of how I think of like, you know, a future state where their stuff matters a whole lot less. So, and the points of differentiation for their hefty enterprise systems are few and far between.
So like, and I know like this episode is, we're just like, I keep saying this, we're going to need to do another one, but you know, it is what it is, but, and it's fun. So so I can do these forever, obviously. You know, I think, so what you're talking about, John, you're bringing up a really good point, and it's about, we're talking about now with access control, using this example, you're saying, okay, we have the large enterprise solutions out there that are going to have to like, kind of, one, it reminds me a little bit of this Blockbuster example with evolution. Like you have to be willing to evolve. You have to realize like what you've done for so many years, like it's no longer the game of like, hey, I'm better than the next guy. It's right. Turning into a game of how do we use what you have? And the video example, bringing it back to that, is a perfect example of how with AI, we are leveraging the existing architecture and you're overlaying that analytic onto those cameras that already have been purchased, right? And that's an example of how that played out, right? Like now we have that whole industry built around video analytics and the cameras and the VMS side of it, right? And like, that was a perfect example of how video analytics came into the market and used what was there. And all they were doing was providing software. And if we play that back to Silicon Valley and why Silicon Valley and the software companies are some of the most profitable companies in the world, is obviously because they don't have that hardware component, but they were smart. These video analytic companies that came about where they might have already been using that AI in other areas of business realized there was an opportunity to get into this market and leverage what's already there. And with access control, it has not been that way for a very long. The HID reader, you know, like.
Well, it's like, that's why, so you don't, very often I'll ask an end user that I'm doing discovery for an assessment or technology roadmap, what kind of access control system do you have? HID. And I will say, no, that's what kind of readers and cards you have, but what kind of access control system do you have? And that's a whole nother topic we can get into about how the channel management and the burden of non-connectivity between the end user and the original manufacturer like creates all types of problems. But for another day, what we're lacking in access control is true innovation, right? So when you think, I mean, Innovation Nation, right? That's what we're here for. There has not been true innovation in access control decades. Mm-hmm. I mean, so incremental technology enhancement is not innovation, right? You know, so innovation is either taking a existing concept and doing it completely differently, or coming up with a completely new concept or technology in that existing space. And we haven't seen that. Again, I'll say making your blue lights blink green is not innovative. That's you know, adding simple featers, and so that's where we find ourselves. And I'm reading Lee Otis's book, the 6 phase changes. It's kind of relevant to our discussion because he lays it all out in his book about, you know, like what we're going through, what we're managing, and where we're going to be at on the other end. So another shameless plug here, go out and grab it, read, it's exceptional. And there's a lot to unpack in that book, but it gives you this kind of macro level discussion. And bringing us back to our original topic of the why, you need a compelling why in access control. And usually it comes from the end user. Mm-hmm. So again, we'll get back to that example that I talked about with the development of an insider threat program. The why that I had was I needed to know proactively if someone was breaking the norm of their access control profile, and proactively be able to intervene and understand why they're coming when they shouldn't be there, or why they're deviating from things that they have created. I had that why. Ultimately, when I went to find a partner who could help me address that why, the cost point was way too high because they needed to put in all this other stuff that wasn't close to my why, that I didn't care about, to solve my why. My why was little, their solution was too big, so it wasn't compatible. Mm-hmm. And you know, inevitably we just said, I guess we're going to manually manage this bad boy for a while. So, you know, that's where, when you look at access control, the why is at least broadly lacking. I think if you know, you and I could probably come up with them. I'm sure there's end users out there that have them. But if no one's making the solution for the why, mm-hmm. then there's no value to be created.
So John, this is a good, I think, stopping point, just because I know, like, you know, part of the goal with the series too is we'll keep the conversation a little more efficient now, which is great, because I think when we record the next one, we can now dive into access control and really break that apart, because as we can agree, like, access control is a very layered solution. Like, there's many more components involved, whether it's all the way from the gate to the door to the, you know, to the elevator to whatever you're talking about. There's so many. When you talk about access control, you have access points, And every single layer of that requires a different level of security, thought, operation, whatever it may be, by the user, by the integrator, by the actual person in the building, right? The end user or the users within. And it's very interesting because I think in our next conversation, using access control now as this why will be great, because we'll be able to break into each level of it and talk to each why to that level, right? Like, I'll give maybe a quick sneak peek, but like, if you think from an admin perspective, badging is something I think you and I can probably talk about for hours. And not just spend hours doing, but talk about how much of a nuance that is, the fatigue around just badging. And it's been done for 30 years now.
And there are examples of organizations who have invested. So these are end user organizations who have invested mightily to create automation, bending a system against its will to perform the actions that they want to automate inside, because potentially the manufacturers aren't being responsive to their why.
Or they've had to create it themselves. They have to have teams dedicated, right? So I think it's a good like stopping point / segue into our next conversation for the next part of this, because access control, I think, is an area that needs a lot of innovation. It needs to change. It needs to evolve. We've seen it done with video, which was why I think it was great we started with video, because it's easy to talk about. It's easy to say, this is a really good example of where we did it. We've accomplished it. Okay, now it's time to move on to the next part of the industry, right? Like, access control 2020, no one wants to touch anything. There's so many areas as an industry that we can evolve, innovate, change, get better at, and it's like time we do it.
Yeah, I agree. Look forward to it.
Great. Thank you so much, Jon. I'm excited.
All right. Thank you. Appreciate it.